Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie Maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. It's been a while since I just dedicated a show to movies that are just available on streaming, so I thought I'd change it up for a week for a special streaming episode with 4 brand new reviews that are available to stream right now. This week on the show, You Can Hide But You Can't Run in the Netflix original Don't Move. In this town in 2003, it was a killer year, and this murder is set on repeat in the Netflix original Time Cuts. It's the man behind the Maestro in this documentary about the legendary film composer. Streaming on Disney Plus is the music of John Williams. And finally, based on the shocking true story of the dating game's deadliest bachelor, is this Netflix original Woman of the Hour. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows, what? A roar and a burst of flame.
The Movie Wire podcast.
You need people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Now streaming on Netflix, a high school student accidentally travels back to 2003 and decides to stop the serial killer who murdered her sister in Time Cut.
20 years ago, my sister and 3 other students were murdered.
Four kids murdered and they never even caught the guy.
I never got to meet my sister. They say you can't change the past, but what if you could?
What is going on?
What's the date?
April 16th?
What year?
Honey, it's 2003.
You're from the future. This is insane.
Look,
What is this?
it's my phone.
You call people on this?
I don't really call people, but
It's supposed to be like $1 million.
now I have a chance to stop the murders.
You look really familiar. Something really bad starts tonight. How do you know that?
You can't stop this. You know, you could create a ripple effect that could be devastating.
We're not altering the future. We're just giving it a little makeover.
Makeover.
A makeover.
Yeah, like in She's All That.
I don't remember that movie ending in the destruction of the space-time continuum.
In the future, do they catch the guy?
Summer, you're next.
Now, not too long ago, we were introduced to another time-traveling slasher movie called It's a Wonderful Knife, which was full of cliches with an uninteresting villain and predictable situations. Now we have Time Cut, and Time Cut isn't that much different. During the first half of the movie, we get a soundtrack full of early 2000s songs that we have heard from teen movies over and over and over again. We get a generic villain, generic slasher with such a cheap-looking costume that just walks around wielding a knife and kills people. The first 20-30 minutes, my eyes rolled in the back of my head more times than I can count. But then, we get a scene in a mall where we have a pair of potential victims who are shopping, with an employee in the store assisting them. All of a sudden, the lights are suddenly dark, the employee is magically gone, and nobody is left in the mall. My first reaction was just to shout at the screen and saying, "Come the fuck on." But then something happened as the movie went on from there. I realized this wasn't following a slasher formula per se, it was giving homage to slasher films. After this scene, I realized something else happened. I was actually beginning to enjoy the characters and performances, and at times some smart turns in dialogue. Between It's a Wonderful Knife and Time Cut, there is a lot of similarities to them. But the main difference is that Time Cut self-realizes itself and winks to the viewer with the tone that it sets. Between some of these self-realized cliches, these colorful characters, these good performances, it's supposed to trigger some entertainment value and fun factor. Our main time traveler, Lucy, played by Madison Bailey, who gives an infectious performance here, is terrorized by a killer in the present, but lands up in the past to stop this killer before he kills her sister. She then meets her sister and befriends her, along with Quinn, played by Griffin Gluck, the science whiz that helps guide Lucy back to her time. But as Lucy unravels the mystery of time and the mystery and curiosity of her killer, she has a tough choice to make by the time we reach the climax. Time Cut was written by director Hannah McPherson and It's a Wonderful Knife writer Michael Kennedy. Here, Kennedy is in his safe place where our director McPherson, who helped pen the screenplay, obviously had a vision in mind to lighten the mood when it comes to the fun factor. We can see a lot of similarities here in Kennedy's penned screenplay that we saw from his original script of Freaky starring Vince Vaughn. McPherson uses some smart choices when it comes to integrating clothing and darkness along with some smart lighting techniques. Now, the one thing that isn't a consistent strategy by McPherson is that it takes about half the movie to really get me to buy into this film, and for the translation of this film to really tell the audience that this isn't just a generic slasher film. This is something just a tad different that, if you're patient, will crescendo in some kind of cleverness, but then just leads to an unfulfilling climax. By the time the credits rolled, the ending lingered with me, but not in a good way. It tries to satisfy a vast audience. And I think that's where McPherson and Kennedy tried to do too much to please with this material. As I was reflecting, I thought about how little we actually saw our killer, and a lot of the movie was spent on building chemistry between Lucy, Lucy's sister Summer, played by Antonia Gentry, and of course our science guy Quinn. And the movie throws in a dash of how do I get back to my time conflict. There is a lot to unfold here to just call it a generic slasher film, and I could also appreciate the attempt at balance. And I'll say it again, attempt at balance. At times, Time Cut almost reminded me of the tone and feeling of a movie I just reviewed with Mel Gibson called Monster Summer. But this one was targeted more for teen and adults. There's a sense of an adult adventure or danger, if you will. And it really does help promote the fun factor to it. It doesn't feel like a slasher film. But by the time the credits come on to the unfulfilling climax, even though it doesn't feel like a slasher film, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's Jason Voorhees. Going into Netflix, going into this movie, if you're looking at the cover and thinking it's just a straight up slasher film, you're going to be disappointed in the amount of slashes. But those going in with a build of curiosity of dangerous adventure might be satisfied. This is where it's tricky for filmmakers, when writing with the intent of attempting to entertain a vast audience. When it comes to this type of movie, you're always going to have the same number of people either loving it, hating it, or meh-ing it. But I will say this to her credit. Our Lucy character, again played by Madison Bailey, gives a performance that really does sell the character. She gives off a subtle range of an earlier Zendaya, before tearing two best friends apart using her body and selfishness with the obsession in winning in The Challengers. I would say this movie was worth seeing just for the entertaining performance of Bailey as Lucy, along with her chemistry between Summer and Quinn. These three were the best part of the entertainment value in watching Time Cut. Even to a point when we do see our killer, I just wanted to go back and watch the characters. Time Cut is a very inconsistent film when it comes to balance and pacing. It had my finger on the power button during the first act, it had my eyes on the screen during the second act, and it made me roll my eyes and cringe during the climax. But at the same time, so do all other slasher movies, and that's their intent. It's to aim at the fun factor of ridiculousness. Time Cut doesn't follow the same formula at all times, and there's an appreciation for that, while still nodding to the audience that this is still a slasher film. Time Cut is streaming on Netflix right now, and I'm giving Time Cut 2.5 stars. A seasoned killer injects a grieving woman with a paralytic agent. She must run, fight, and hide before her body shuts down. Now streaming on Netflix is Don't Move.
Have you started to feel it yet?
What did you do to me?
Just a special relaxant to make things easier on both of us.
Are you crazy?
You have about 20 minutes before you're completely paralyzed. At minute 1, your fine motor skills will start to go. At minute 10, your legs will begin tingling. Minute 15, your legs will give out altogether. At minute 18, your breathing will become labored. And just before everything shuts down on you, your voice.
Netflix has become a vast sea of content where hidden gems occasionally float to the surface amid a deluge of forgettable titles. Unfortunately, Don't Move is one of those forgettable films that feels more like a cruel practical joke than a legitimate attempt at storytelling. Now, when it comes to the premise, I've been surprised before with a movie that tries to stretch a concept of moving a body around that can't move for 90 minutes. I mean, Weekend at Bernie's did it twice. But the difference here is, 1, it's not a comedy, and 2, there isn't a lot of supporting characters to help move this movie along. We are left with Iris, played by Kelsey Asbill, who within the first 15 minutes shows that she wants to end her life by looking over a cliff in the woods. That is until handsome Richard comes along, played by Finn Wittrock, to convince her that life matters. It doesn't take long for the conflict to present itself when Richard injects Iris with a substance that will make her unable to move or talk. So now what we are left with is a 90-minute movie about a killer and a character that can't move or talk. We now have a one-man show that attempts to be a thriller. Don't Move was directed by newer directors Brian Netto and Adam Schindler and written by TJ Kimphil and David White. For a movie with very little happening, it amazes me it takes 2 writers and 2 directors to take on a film like this, especially when it comes to the writing. Now, given the premise of a killer that talks Iris off the ledge of killing herself to be the one that wants to kill her himself, this could make for some deep dialogue, especially from our Richard character. It's almost like a Saw message, a Jigsaw message of appreciate the life that you have, or a deep-seated evil that sees a perfect victim of one that already wants to die, or a serial killer with substance that wants to take the joy of somebody killing oneself in his own hands. There are multiple directions to take these characters, but our writers dip their toes in all of the above with no clear direction on where to take these characters or how to deliver a singular message. When Don't Move finally decides on message, it isn't until the end of the film where it tries to tie all the knots together. But by that time, it's too late. The film has taken numerous discourses of messaging for anything to make sense by the end of the movie. The exploration of what it means to be trapped both physically and psychologically could have been compelling, but instead it feels like an afterthought. The moral dilemmas that arise are surface level at best, and by the time the credits roll, viewers are left with more questions than answers, none of which are particularly interesting, or nor do I care to ponder because it's a waste of time. The best way to view this film is to forget that the writers are attempting a message and be like our Iris character, be numb and paralyzed as our filmmakers take us through this mess of a movie. The only relatable character here is our Iris character. I related to this character because all I did was stare at the screen feeling completely numb and paralyzed. And that could have been the 4 bourbons I had, but you know what? It doesn't change my thought of the movie. The Miner. the Miner. Saving grace here is the performance of Finn Wittrock, who gives a good portrayal of a serial killer. He was actually kind of creepy, but sadly, the dialogue is a waste of his talent. It's a challenging role for what it is, trying to build tension from scene to scene with just moving a body from one situation to another. It baffles me that for somebody that's paralyzed and a killer that knows exactly how long it takes for the substance to take effect in her body, how she still manages to escape him in the beginning of the movie. It almost comes across like a calamity of errors or a serial killer parody. Believable moments are never present in this film. We have one scene where we have Iris floating down a river paralyzed, and she comes out of it with no damage. Then we have another scene where she can partially move, she has some movement, and is in a sinking rowboat, and she goes underwater. Then she decides she can't move. With two writers, two directors, did nobody catch the "oh, come on" moments? Don't Move is a film that could have been an intriguing exploration of fear and psychological tension, especially when it comes to the inner conflict and the external conflict, but instead devolves into a frustrating mess of a thriller. The lack of character depth, poor pacing, and cringe-inducing dialogue all conspire to create an experience that is completely forgettable. The film feels less like a cautionary tale about the consequences of life's movement and more like warning against the consequences of bad filmmaking. The movie should have been called Move Far, Far Away from This One. Weekend at Bernie's had better messaging than this. I'm giving Don't Move 1.5 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
The story behind the rise of Donald Trump in The Apprentice, which told a story that we already knew, but with award-winning performances, receiving 2.5 stars. Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? It'll change your life in The Substance, which was gross, grotesque, but with substance, receiving 3 stars. The world is a stage, and then the world booed it, but for me it wasn't that bad. And Joker Philia 2, receiving 2.5 stars. Discover the origin behind the rivalry in Transformers 1 that didn't transform into anything original, receiving 2 stars. They went looking for a new life and found them in Alien Romulus, which in the theater no one heard me care, but rather heard me groan, receiving 2 stars. Sometimes to survive, we must become more than we are programmed to be, and not only one of the best movies of the year, but the best animated films in the last decade in The Wild Robot, which received 4 stars. Dennis Quaid from young to old played Ronald Reagan in Reagan. That was a valiant effort, but always felt like something was missing, that received 2.5 stars. The juice is loose in the sequel, 36 years in the making, in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. That was a fun trip that was very much alive, receiving 3 stars. And it makes me really hope that there is a Beetlejuice Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Oh shit. Everybody deserves a happy ending, and Deadpool and Wolverine, that was one of the biggest, surprising, and audience-fueled experiences of the summer, receiving 3.5 stars. The things left unspoken can't kill you, and I won't speak to the repetitive formula because I can hear the well-executed pacing and performances in Hear No Evil, which received 3 stars. Love Hurts and the Devil's in the Details, and Strange Darling, which had a twist that may have come too early, but still a refreshing take on the tale of a serial killer that landed a killer 3 stars. True Love Never Dies, but this movie should. In the remake to the Brandon Lee classic comes The Crow, which flew south really quick, and hopefully it stays the fuck there, receiving 1.5 stars. Then finally, meet Aya. She's an AI here to help in Afraid, but she couldn't help me end the movie quicker, and I'm afraid for anybody that wastes their money on this movie, receiving 1.5 stars. Alexa, block Afraid.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet.
God damn it. You can check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and please don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Now, before we get into the last half of reviews, there is a podcast that I listen to every single week, and I tend to drop in from time to time. You can also find me on his monthly Pilot View segment, and I'm talking about Dan over at Casting Views. If you haven't checked it out yet, the link to that show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from Dan over at Casting Views now.
Fancy taking a humorous trip down a random topic each week? You do? Well, you're in luck. Casting Views, presented by me, Dan, and a host of guests, bring you just that. With topics from the world of entertainment, science, sport, and everyday life, there's bound to be a topic that's going to inform and amuse. Catch Casting Views every Sunday on all listening platforms now.
Cheryl Bradshaw, single woman looking for a suitor on a hit 1970s TV show, chooses charming bachelor Rodney Alcala, unaware that behind the man's gentle facade, he hides a deadly secret in The Woman of the Hour.
Did you want me to try it again?
No. We'll be in touch.
Hey, Cheryl.
Yeah.
No.
No. Janet?
Janet. Helen, I can barely afford my rent.
Well, I booked you a guest spot on a TV show. Right, you're here.
Great. You okay? Uh-huh.
Great. Have fun.
All right, everybody, let's get started.
Let the games begin.
Bachelor number 1. This is nice and easy. What are girls for?
What do you mean?
Just what I said. I believe in you, Bachelor number 1.
That's good.
Bachelor number 2. What are girls for?
Why does this feel like a trap?
That old feeling inside.
I've been on this show since 1968. The one thing I've learned is, no matter what words they use, the question beneath the question remains the same.
You know when I look in your eyes, I go crazy.
What's the question?
Which one of you will hurt me?
And Bachelor number 3. I'm counting on you. What are girls for?
In Anna Kendrick's directorial debut, who takes on a based-on-true-story event film of the 70s, killer Rodney Alcala, who made it on a dating game show. Kendrick also stars as Cheryl, an actress desperate to find work and have her breakout. She gets fed up and almost gives up on her dream of becoming a famous actress until her agent calls and books her on a dating game show to just get her name out and face out there. She may soon regret it when her grand prize may be losing her life if she picked the wrong bachelor. Now, this is a movie that is a tricky balancing act, but Woman of the Hour makes it more tricky than what it needs to be. Our writer, Ian McDonald, whose only previous work was 2016, Some Freaks. He wants to put in mixes of women empowerment, serial killers, period pieces, thrills, to even a race of the clock. But between the writing of McDonald and the direction by Kendrick, it doesn't know where to slow down to really give the viewer a focal point of an actual point. It feels like the movie is at a constant tug-of-war or a character battle of who can be the most interesting or who can be the least interesting. And between two characters, I felt like I was stuck in the middle of Mom and Dad asking Mom and Dad to please stop fighting. Our main character, Cheryl, and our serial killer, Rodney, played by Daniel Zavato, each have their own cutscenes of who they really are. And between this constant struggle of winning over the viewer with interest, I can announce the winner and save everybody some time. They both win at being uninteresting. Woman of the Hour has to play the balancing act between these two and their backstories. And because of this, when we finally get to the actual main event of the dating game, two things happen. One, we don't care! And two, there isn't a lot of build of stakes surrounding our killer, and both of these are because we merely just get the visual idea of these two without substance. Our Cheryl character goes from desperation to an attempt at women empowerment, which I can appreciate the attempt at messaging, but it doesn't fit when it attempts to do so during the last act of the film. It's a completely unbalanced written character. And Rodney, our serial killer, who poses as a photographer to gain the trust with his victims, we merely get scenes of photo shoots, then kills with a creepy serial killer smile. There's nothing in between. There's nothing for both characters to really tell us who they are. At times you can feel this movie wants to tell us something, but it just merely feels thrown in, and that's exactly what it is. Thrown in messaging. It's like our writer Ian McDonald brainstormed what message he wanted to land and filled in character situations and simplistic things they say to help these characters land the message, but with absolutely nothing of substance to make me care. We have seen serial killer movies time and time again, especially when it comes to the 70s and 80s with a lot of female victims, and I can understand the intent of landing a message because of this, but McDonald never really connects the dots in terms of dialogue, and Kendrick's direction never really gets us there to supplement the lack of dialogue to build message or even danger with our serial killer. It attempts to shove everything into the climax and ask the viewer just to accept it. One of the most baffling aspects of Woman of the Hour is that it attempts to tackle serious themes merely in a single act. You have moments where the film tries to make a statement about dating culture, empowerment, and the complexities of how to portray a serial killer. Unfortunately, these moments land with all the grace of me trying to walk upstairs after a bottle of bourbon. It's as if the film couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a thriller or a serious commentary, resulting in a jumbled mess that satisfies neither. Now, there is nothing more interesting when it comes to a character study than a good true crime or serial killer telling. You have the danger element, you have the why question, you have the how questions. It's a formula that makes for a good edge-of-your-seat thriller. 2007 Zodiac did this brilliantly with utilizing characters to speak on behalf of the killer. But here, Ian McDonald's writing needed to pick a side, pick a character to tell a story through, or even not spend so much time with the backstory with our Cheryl character and take us directly to the game show and build a movie around that. And not to throw everything at McDonald, this is also due in part to Kendrick's direction. This wasn't a movie for a first-time director. This movie needed a director with a clear focus on what's going to make these characters more effective, more entertaining, and still give a proper message. That's a tall order for a movie like this and a first-time director, especially a director that's directing herself. Now, Kendrick, for her first go-around, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either. She got the time period feeling right, the tone right, but pacing, character direction, and how to make something feel relevant in a film didn't show her forte here. It also would have been wise to do proper research for the film, not just base it off of documentaries or things you've read. The living victim of Alcala, Morgan Rowan, who survived an attack at both 13 and 16 years old, was never consulted or asked to be consulted. When making a piece from history, especially involving a serial killer, one would think that getting inside the feelings of a living victim would have been important. And we can tell that some of these characters were based off of interpretations, documentaries, or just what felt good to be in a movie. Our characters here are stiff and generic, and it shows the amount of care that went into this film when it comes to real emotion by not doing that, not doing the research, because these characters feel like pure cardboard. Anna Kendrick's intent was clear that this is a movie she rallied around just because of pure messaging, and the intent of the film clouds the mind. Instead of how do we get the viewer to feel the message, we're just merely going to show the viewer what the message is. When this happens in a movie, that's where it becomes forgettable and generic. Hence why this movie went directly to streaming. One of the main reasons to watch this movie is the saving grace of the actual performance from Daniel Zavato, who never really goes over the top sinister and plays it subtle, to a believable trap to his victims. Along with the environment, the film does a great job on creating a believable period piece. Woman of the Hour isn't a terrible film, it's just a misguided one. It feels like it's right at home for streaming. It'll eat up some time, it'll take us on a ride of curiosity, only to prove by the end that the message they wanted to tell was the most important part. Not how they got there or what you remember. Just the message that they just kind of plant in your lap. But when it comes to a movie about a horrific serial killer that targeted females and even had the confidence to go on a dating show, I feel like there is a more interesting movie than what was made. Or the execution with the messaging was poorly executed, in which it was. I'm giving Woman of the Hour 2 stars. Follows the life of legendary composer John Williams. Streaming on Disney Plus now is the music of John Williams.
The greatest way to demonstrate how much music affects movies, play it absolutely with no music at all. And then go back and do the whole scene again with all the cues. And you'll recognize the absolute brilliance of John Williams.
The minute John raises his baton and plays the first theme, you just go, oh my God, here's another one.
Star Wars basically would not be Star Wars without Johnny Williams' music.
People say, how do you do so much work? I was filled with the love of music and the pleasure of doing it with great musicians.
After he does music for my movie, I start to see my movie in his way.
The first thing I played for Stephen on this piano was this. And I played that for him, and he said, what is that? What are you going to do with it?
He's somebody who learned his skills painstakingly. I think people should see somebody who has worked alone in a room for 60 plus years. There's a lot of sacrifices, and I think that he expresses himself through music.
Music for a musician is like breathing. It supports us, sustains us, gives us energy.
The fact that the same man wrote music for Star Wars, the Olympics, Poseidon Adventure, and Earthquake, he always finds a way to tap into the essence of what makes it moving or meaningful.
The main reason I think it's important to celebrate him is just to say thank you for that amount of joy.
He's always in a process of discovery.
He finds a whole new way of telling the story musically each time. It's the purest form of art I've ever experienced from any human being.
Music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music.
This is a man that made symphonic orchestra soundtracks something that people sought out, something that people thought were cool. A composer that made people pay attention to not only the notes being played, but help pull audiences and viewers into the story. Music plays a big part in how we react to a certain scene, from excitement, fear, tears, to adventure. In cinematic history, there hasn't been a composer with as many movie themes that get stuck in our heads or something that we just end up whistling as John Williams' movie scores. From Jaws, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, to at the time of release, the #1 soundtrack album of all time being Star Wars. Now, there will be very little argument that John Williams is a composer that is a household name, but what this documentary does is go beyond the popular music that we have heard on screen and give us an appreciation for the well-known music, but also give us an appreciation for the music we might not know of yet, as well as a life that he has lived, along with giving the viewer the temptation to go back and listen to the music you didn't know what Johnny Williams performed or composed. And as I was watching the music of John Williams, I started to reminisce. I remember when I was in school, I was in band from 5th grade up to 12th grade, and every time there was new sheet music being handed out, my fingers would be crossed hoping for a fun, memorable score like one from John Williams. But this rarely happened, except for one concert that was meant to be a fun concert. I think it was for some other students. My band teacher at the time handed out the theme to Jurassic Park, and this at the time was my favorite Williams score. And after about a week of playing the music in class, my band teacher stopped the song and stated how much she hated this score. That comment stayed with me even up to today on how can somebody hate that score. It had a sense of adventure, it had a sense of wonder, curiosity. As it turns out, she hated the simplicity of it. She hated the difficulty level, which as a teacher, I guess I get. But fast forward to today. This sparks the genius of Williams, who didn't go for difficulty, but rather how the music was going to support and amplify the feels on screen. Even going back to Jaws with the haunting 2 notes theme. Williams didn't put his ego into his music, he put his imagination and his interpretation of what would speak to the story. There's a scene in the documentary when they interview Williams, and he speaks to the main theme of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He pulled out a page of full measures with different variations of the 5 notes. The 5 notes of communication with our aliens. You can tell in his face Williams broke out in a subtle smile as he's talked about just these 5 notes. He had a sparkle in his eye to how this music is like a language and how 5 notes should act as a sentence, where even the last note can make it seem like a question mark or a but or a then or an or. The melody had to end with a note to act as a period. The documentary is filled with bits like this that encourage us not just watch these movies again, but to listen to the music and tell the story in our head. At one point, the movie interviews J.J. Abrams on John Williams' soundtracks and scores. And again, this is where I started going down memory lane. He said something and he makes a good point. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you can't just watch a movie after watching it in a theater. You would just put on the record and stare at the album cover and play the picture in his head. This is something where the interviews put relatability on what we're watching, and this goes true for how the whole documentary plays out. I still remember putting the cover to my soundtracks up and listening to the music. It puts our emotions up front and center on Mr. Williams' music and takes the viewer on a nostalgic trip of the first time listening and seeing his score play on the big screen. Now, we obviously get a laundry list of celebrities that share their experiences with Williams, from Ron Howard, Seth MacFarlane, J.J. Abrams, George Lucas, and of course, longtime collaborators Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy. Though I appreciated the amount of self-reflection of just not their experience with Williams, but their experiences listening to Williams' music. But at times, these interviews can take away from what we really want to know about Williams. Now, it's been said that Williams can be shy or private at times. The film touches on some painful events in Williams' life, from the death of his wife, Barbara Ruick, in 1974 at the young age of 41, to having to raise his daughter and 2 boys. Now, I'm not saying I wanted to dig deep into Williams' psyche of these events or wanting private moments of Williams against his wishes released, but when it comes to the topic of music, this is where I wish it would have gone deeper. During emotional, sad, or traumatic events, music plays a big part in our lives as a listener. Our director, Laurent Bosrio, brings up the time in Williams' life, but really never ties it together to how or if this changed the way he worked, composed, or interpreted song to screen differently. It raised some questions for me of his process of composition of creativity that I really wanted to see connect with Williams. This is where we see the celebrities tell the story for Williams, and we can see the private man that he is. We have John Williams walk us through some of the most notable pieces. We have clips of award shows, but when it comes to a documentary about Williams, we don't see a lot of Williams on a deeper level. I would have loved to see some questions answered, such as, was there a pivotal scene that you just said, aha, this is the theme for this movie? Was there an emotional element to it? There's a lot of internal emotion I would have loved to see put on screen, but that's where the documentary feels more designed for the entertainment value versus a film about a man, music, and movies. The celebrity interviews do supplement quite nicely, and we do connect with the feelings of what we're being told on screen to a nostalgic level, but there's a missing connection from Williams himself. There will be no denying that this is a wildly nostalgic, entertaining trip down memory lane. It's a great documentary. The music of John Williams catches your attention right from the get-go, just like hearing for the first time of the score blast through the speakers while you see the Star Wars logo on screen. It grabs you with a sense of nostalgia and gives you an appreciation for the music in a new light that will make you want to revisit. But not only that, open your ears to listen for new things that will make his music feel brand new again, and possibly unlock a new set of feelings. The music of John Williams is playing on Disney Plus right now, and I'm giving it 3.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
Let's wrap it up, time to go. Screen special on that movie flow. Lights and camera, it's all aglow. Tune in next time, don't you know? Goodbye. See you later, see you next week. Now it's time to end the Movie Wire. Roll the credit, let the story keep the Movie Wire. You're the one we admire. Now it's that go by Sarlin. Right over, see you instead. The Movie Wire, Republic from Victory, the Movie Wire. You're the one we admire. See you next week. Now it's time to end the Movie Wire. Right on the continent. The Movie Wire will do that. Thank you for the ride. Just inside it up with deadliest. I'll see you next week. Don't forget, stay tuned. Now Brooklyn, say goodbye.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.
Let the credits roll. We say farewell. Join us next time. We'll have more tales to tell.